Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and today we have to talk about Facebook because Facebook shows us all how to spin a data breach, and this is what's going on. This is coming from the BBC. An internal Facebook email was accidentally sent to a Belgium news outlet called Data News, and it revealed Facebook's strategy for dealing with the leaking of account details from 533 million people across 106 countries. This news broke a couple of weeks ago. Now, this email was published by Data News on April 8th. This is several days after that story broke. Now, basically the email said that press coverage on the issue from top-tier global publications had already declined by 30% and enter the spin. Basically, they're waiting out the clock here on yet another storm on their watch. Some other passages from this internal email I think are really interesting and telling. For example, I quote, "Publications have offered more critical takes of Facebook's response, framing it as evasive, a deflection of blame, and absent of an apology for users impacted." Now, basically, pieces were often driven by quotes from, quote, "data experts or regulators keen on criticizing the company's response as insufficient." In a section termed basically headed long-term strategy, Facebook said it did not plan additional statements on this issue. Quote, "We expect more scraping incidents and think it's important to both frame this as a broad industry issue and normalize the fact that this activity happened regularly." Basically, they also mentioned that they would plan to include a blog post talking about their anti-scraping work and that offered transparency on how the firm was dealing with this problem. More on that in a bit. They also went on to say that or mentioned to news outlets that other organizations or social media like Clubhouse recently was scraped as well. Facebook did confirm that this memo was genuine, and they told the BBC, and I quote, "We understand people's concerns, which is why we continue to strengthen our systems to make scraping from Facebook without our permission more difficult and go after the people behind it." Later, their spokesperson added, as I just mentioned, LinkedIn and Clubhouse have also faced similar data scraping issues. And some points here, if I may, because I think this is important. Overall, one of the goals of a data breach, or rather the disclosure of a data breach, is to manage and also attempt to mitigate the reputation damage that these kinds of incidents bring to an organization. Nobody is disputing that. You're in damage control mode if you basically have a whole bunch of users or people's data breached on your watch, whether it's internal to the company or if it's public facing. Now, by virtue of that, alerting the public to those users, or alerting the public, or those users that need alerting, these messages are crafted to make it seem like we're all in this together, that it happens to many organizations, and of course the old chestnut of basically, at this time, we have found no evidence of malfeasance of your data, which usually is true at that moment technically, but it cannot really be quantified in any real way beyond, let's say, not finding that information in identity theft forums. And if you do find a user's information has been used, who's to say it's not from like the Equifax breach from like 3-4 years ago? This is what we're talking about here, but that is usually what you'll see in a data breach disclosure. But where Facebook totally drops the ball here, and this is the most important part of a breach disclosure, they actually have to disclose a breach. They don't do that. All too often, we have seen Facebook do literally nothing until a whistleblower comes forward, Cambridge Analytica, or a report that is created in sub-publication detailing a found breach of information. For example, billions and billions of scraped data points from Facebook showing up in hundreds of thousands of third-party Amazon Web Services servers from companies who scraped it or bought it, or basically bought the data from there. They never mentioned until it was detailed in a report. I actually did a rather long video on that specific issue. They got us all breached in that one. And so by virtue of this, they also fail at the transparency side of this, even though they claim we're going to be more transparent on how we're handling it. Well, yeah, be transparent that you actually got hit. Own these things. It is the single greatest way to ensure customer loyalty. You have to own the data breach as much as it sucks. You've got to pull that Band-Aid off. You've got to be honest with them. This is exactly why I'm a fan of Samsung phones. And I will give you this example. It wasn't a data breach, but you might remember when Samsung released the Note 7 3 or 4 years ago and it got all explodey on everybody. They basically lost $20+ billion in market cap in something like a week as a result of this. But they sent everybody fireproof boxes. They owned the situation. They had a detailed report that came out that basically had very technical schematics of exactly what went wrong and how it went wrong with the data connector to the battery and all these kinds of things. And they also laid out steps of how this would never happen again to a Samsung phone, and it hasn't. That is transparency. If these phones started exploding and saying, well, we don't know anything about this, just return them and oh well, let's just move on, that is not comforting, because when I go to buy a Note 8 or a Note 9 or a Note 10 or whatever that Note is past the Note 7, am I wondering, well, the Note 7 got exploded, did they actually fix this problem? Facebook needs to own these things. And if you are going through a data breach or an incident or something along those lines, I cannot advise you enough to be transparent. That is how you start to reestablish trust with your employees, your customers, whoever got hit. It's beyond important, and Facebook fails that massive rule. Their transparency is way after the fact, after a whistleblower or a report or a leaked email or something else comes out. And that is one of the reasons why we have almost no trust in Facebook, aside from the fact that we know they just data mine everything from us. So that is your news of the day. That is basically not how to handle a data breach, and those are the nuts and bolts of any breach disclosure that you're going to see, and here we are. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP, and please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well, and as always, stay safe and stay online. Thanks, everyone.